Welcome to Family Health by Mini First Aid. Mini First Aid are the UK's leading family first aid provider, and we are delighted to bring our latest podcast series to you, giving you all the information that you need around family health subjects. Thanks for joining. Welcome to the Family Health Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Unity Mutual, a trusted partner for your savings and investments and partner that understands your commitment to your child's health and financial future. When you choose Unity Mutual for a junior individual savings account, you secure your child's savings journey and receive a free mini first aid class. But it's not just about caring for their health, it's also about setting them up for a brighter future. Unity Mutual believes in enriching lives beyond pounds and pence, empowering you with both financial stability and life-enhancing opportunities. Let's dive in. Hello folks, I'm Kate, the founder of Mini First Aid, and welcome to our podcast, Family Health. We are delighted to welcome you back to Series 2 of our podcast, where we're going to continue to bring you top family health advice from our leading experts. So without further ado, and I am so delighted that this lady has agreed to come on and chat to me. I'm absolutely over the moon to introduce to you Molly Forbes from the Body Happy organisation. Molly's going to talk to us about a hugely important topic of our time, children's body image. So welcome, Molly. Thanks for coming to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so lovely to be here.
Brilliant. Now, tell me a little bit. I know loads about you. I've been following you for a long time, and we'll share all the handles after today's podcast so that you can join following Molly and the work of Body Happy Org. But if you don't know Molly or haven't come across Molly before, tell us a little bit about yourself and the Body Happy organisation.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a mum of two. I've got two daughters, 13 and almost 9-year-old. I'm a former journalist and public speaker, and I started working in this field because I was kind of writing about mental health and body image issues from a kind of adult perspective, but really interested in how it was impacting my daughters and some of their friends. And I started campaigning on this subject, specifically around the way that diet products are advertised around children and young people. And that led us to doing some workshops for teachers. So I'm not a teacher myself, but I'm married to a teacher, and I'm the daughter of two teachers, and education is like a big thing in my family. So I was really kind of wanting to look at how this subject shows up in schools, and it's something that I know that a lot of teachers don't get a lot of support with. So that was how the workshop started, and then Body Happy Org kind of grew organically from that. So within the same time that I was campaigning and we were doing like round tables and these workshops, I was also writing a book for adults who are kind of working and raising young children, called Body Happy Kids. And then we started the social enterprise, and the Body Happy organisation became official. And that was kind of 3 years ago. So we've been going for just under 3 years, and we do workshops for schools and the NHS and anyone who works with young people. We create resources, teaching resources and physical resources. We sell books and all sorts of things like that. And I still do lots of public speaking as well. So I regularly pop up on places like the BBC talking about this subject and just trying to bang the drum for the importance of positive body image in children, and just raising awareness at, you know, what's the depth of the issue, because we are in a crisis at the moment of young children at younger ages feeling bad about their bodies, and it's impacting every area of their life. And so any opportunity that I can to talk about this is a joy for me to be able to spread that message.
I think, Molly, it would be also important to acknowledge that this is a very brave thing to do, because there would be a lot of people that would look at this subject and just go, ooh, I don't even know where to start with this, or I don't know how to start the dialogue. So I love the fact that you're a journalist and you've got that investigative approach, and that you're going to do it. And so did you have a personal motivation behind this as well, or was this just that you found a subject that you were really interested in?
I think, like most people who have a body. Anyone who has a body has body image. And our body image fluctuates. It goes up and down. And like most people who grew up in the era that I grew up in, so I'm just 40, and I grew up in the 90s with, magazines. And although we didn't have social media, there was a very kind of thin beauty aesthetic that we were sort of encouraged to adhere to. And even if I hadn't have grown up in that era, I grew up in a culture like we all live in now that really kind of tells us that our looks are the most important thing about us, that we can infer lots of things about a person's personality or health or lifestyle based on the way they look. And those messages are coming for children younger and younger. It wasn't until I started to unpick some of my own behaviours and then biases around these ideas that I started to notice how they were showing up for my children. And because I'm a journalist, I was really interested in how they were showing up in sort of the cultural landscape that they were growing up in. So looking at the media that they were consuming, and now, the social media they were consuming, and the TV shows, and then also the conversations that they were hearing at school or in the playground or in the park. That kind of cultural piece was really my kind of interest, and that's my area of expertise. So I could unpick some of that stuff, having been on the other side of it in the newsrooms and the places where these decisions are being made, at what kind of is put in front of us as consumers. And I think the thing that just really got to me was, well, I want to be I have these skills and I want to use them in a positive way. And I want to be part of, this movement that is trying to make a difference to change the culture that our kids are growing up in. And if I'm going to do anything positive with these skills, then this is really what I need to do. And yeah, that's kind of my drive. It started off from a real selfish place, I suppose, with just wanting to make the world a nicer place for my kids to grow up in, so that they didn't have to unlearn some of these ideas about bodies that I had to. And then it kind of morphed into a bigger thing. So for me, I always say it's not just about raising my children to be friends with their own bodies and be happy and content and at peace in their own bodies. It's also about raising good humans who treat other children with bodies that don't look or function like their own with the respect and dignity and kindness that everyone deserves.
Absolutely. Now, there will be people listening that might be interested to know the stats. So there's some really quite sad statistics going on around children's body image. Can you talk us through some of the stats perhaps that you've uncovered through your investigations and the sort of journalistic approach to this project?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to dispel this myth that poor body image is something that only shows up in adolescent girls and teenage girls, because that isn't the case. So one stat that might be quite shocking to hear is that children as young as 3 are suffering with poor body image, and anti-fat bias can show up in toddlers, children as young as 3. There was a really interesting survey done in 2016 among childcare professionals, and they reported overhearing some of the children in their care who were as young as 3 talking about, fat tummies and big bellies and in a really negative way, and then making comments about other children's bodies. And these are 3-year-olds, these aren't teenagers. We also know that 1 in 5 girls aren't raising their hand in class for fear of being judged over the way they look. So that sort of shows how body image can really impact how children are behaving at school. And we know that, up to 24% of boys aren't taking part in PE because of the way they feel about their body. So it impacts all genders of children, but it also that stat also shows us how it impacts kids' health behaviours. So then wanting to take part in sport or not can really be it can be really determined by how they feel about their body. So there are lots of quite depressing statistics. There was another huge piece of research done in 2021 by the Women Inequalities Commission. So it was a cross-parliamentary government sanctioned investigation into the breadth and depth of body image and how we all in this country think and feel about our bodies. And they found that 68% of children feel bad about their body most of the time in this country. So it is a really, really common, and I think that's part of the problem. It's such a common issue. So many people are experiencing poor body image that it's sort of become just normalized, and we've just sort of become immune to it and just accepting this idea that actually it's normal to feel bad about your body. And I would argue it isn't normal, and it shouldn't be normal, and it shouldn't ever be just accepted that we can't do anything about it. I don't think it's right that we've got children as young as 3 years old who are feeling bad about their bodies. And I certainly don't think it's right that up to 68% of children in this country are regularly worrying about their bodies, being wrong.
So I mean, I'm a mum of 6, for those of you listening and know me, I'm a mum of 6, and 5 of those are girls. Perhaps I would always have thought about body image affecting girls, but that's very interesting what you were saying about boys, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But what I'm really, if you're watching the podcast, you'll have seen me do it, but just if you're not watching and you're just listening to your podcast platform, my jaw literally dropped when Molly was talking about children as young as 3. Where on earth are 3-year-olds learning negative body image? Where's it coming from? What's the stimulus to make that happen?
I mean, it's all around us. When you start to unpick it, it's like you pick the end of the thread and the thread just unravels. So I like to describe this culture that we're living in that sort of normalizes body shame as we're all sort of in this goldfish bowl, and we're swimming around this goldfish bowl, and we're not even aware that we're in the goldfish bowl. And it's not until you jump out of the goldfish bowl that you're aware it even exists. So where is it showing up? I mean, in the media landscape for children, you could say it's showing up in the lack of representation of, body diversity in some of the cartoons. If you think about the kind of stereotypical idea of a princess or a hero, what do they look like? They've often got a thin, narrow waist, maybe long flowing hair. If their body doesn't look like that, so maybe often, people use Moana, for example, or Encanto as an example of, more diverse heroines. But I would argue, and I think that they're great, but I would also argue that actually those characters are often shown to be like a bit clumsy, a bit kind of kooky, a bit outside of the accepted norm in their little world. They're often, although they're a hero, they're often like falling over, or there's something comedic about them. They're not the kind of the elegant sort of princesses that you would see in like Cinderella or Beauty and the Beast. Or
so
whatever.
we're still laughing at their expense, effectively.
Yeah, so their body is still signifying something about their personality. And if you think about the baddies in some of these films, they don't fit that kind of beauty ideal. So maybe they've got, maybe they're living in a bigger body, maybe they've got a big nose, maybe they're very tall, much taller, maybe there's something that looks different and othering about them. And so children are learning from a really young age to equate the way that someone looks with some aspect of their personality. Or maybe it's just thinking about bodies in like a comedic way. So if you think about Peppa Pig, everyone's favourite cartoon that my kids grew up with, but Daddy Pig's body is often the punchline of the joke in Peppa Pig. And no one ever really sticks up for him. There are many storylines around episodes of Peppa Pig where Daddy's not fit enough, Daddy needs to get healthy. And it's sort of like ha ha ha, joke, but no one ever says, oh, do you know what, how do you think Daddy Pig feels when everyone's always commenting on his body? So children learn right from the media they're consuming right from day one that actually it's okay to make comments about other people's bodies, and these are the kind of inferences that we should be making about someone's body. And they really get this message that there are good bodies and bad bodies. And that those kind of media pieces that they're consuming are often compounded and reinforced and perpetuated by some of the conversations and comments that they're hearing from some of the most important adults in their life. So if it's not their parents, maybe it's their extended relatives, or they're just hearing, comments from, the adults around them making small talk, oh, have you noticed so-and-so's lost weight, or doesn't she look great, or, oh, what do you think about him or this celebrity? And then maybe it's also reinforced by some of the lessons that they're getting in school, where they're learning about, food and health in a very kind of binary way. And that can lead them to start connecting the dots between, what bodies should and shouldn't look like. So it's really complicated, and it's like this sort of messy tangle of thread. Once you start pulling the end of it, you start seeing actually, oh, it's there, it's there, it's there. I don't think it's just one place. It's almost like a jigsaw puzzle that's sort of making this rich tapestry that is actually making it really difficult for children to just grow up thinking, do you know what, my body's not the most important thing about me, and actually I can, make inferences about someone's personality or whatever based on the way they look. It's really difficult for children to just grow up at peace and not even thinking about their bodies in this kind of culture that we have.
I think that example there where you said it's like pulling a piece of string in it all, and and you start to unravel this huge thing, because I expect there's people listening going, oh my gosh, what can I say now? But I want to ask more before we start looking up some of the ways that we can make some positive change for this, because I'm really interested about how there is also a link to body image potentially and bullying, which is something that we dread for our children, or maybe our children have experienced it. Some people listening might have children that have been subject to bullying or have just uncovered bullying. Is there a link between what's going on in the world of body image and with bullying, and how can we stop kids being bullied?
I mean, it's not a link, it's a direct causation. So the World Health Organization found that children in higher weight bodies are 63% more likely to be bullied at school.
Wow.
So we know that weight stigma does show up in the playground, and appearance-based bullying is the most common form of bullying. So it's a safeguarding issue. It really is. It's a really, it's not just the way that we think and feel about bodies. And I say bodies generally, I'm not just talking about our own bodies, but just bodies generally, the assumptions that we hold and the ideas that we hold. It can really impact not just the way that we treat our own bodies, but the way that we treat people around us. And that goes for children as well. And that statistic, that 63% statistic shows that. So the argument that kind of me and my colleagues at the Body Happy organisation make is that actually what we need to be focusing on is changing this culture that makes it, that allows and perpetuates and sort of gives the green light for this type of bullying. Because actually, that's a whole other conversation to talk about the complexity of health and actually the complexity of weight. But what we're doing at the moment, the focus is really on let's change kids' bodies. Let's, whatever it is, let's teach children to eat healthily. Let's give them more opportunities for movement. And if we do all of those things, then children will automatically become thin. And actually that isn't the case, because we know there are over 100 different factors that influence a person's weight. And many of those factors are actually beyond their control. So actually what we need to be doing is creating an environment that shows children and allows children to know that all bodies are good bodies. And once we've created that environment and changed that culture, that will support positive body image. And the irony is that will then lead to children engaging in being more likely to engage in health promoting behaviours. And when I'm talking about healthy behaviours, I'm not just talking about kids like eating vegetables or moving. I'm talking about all the other types of behaviours that are so important for promoting their health. And an important caveat to make with that is that we need to also understand that even if children are then engaging in those behaviours, it doesn't automatically mean that all children will become thin, because we live in a world where body diversity is part of our human species. And, like I just said, all those different factors that influence a person's weight, that isn't what we want to be doing. We don't want to be changing children's bodies. We want to be changing the culture that allows children to be at peace in their bodies and treat their bodies with kindness. And then also, and I'd argue even more importantly, treat the bodies of other people with respect and kindness as well. So yeah, you're right. I'm really pleased that you sort of picked up that thing about bullying, because so often when we think of body image, we think of it as this internal issue that just impacts ourselves or our own children and how they think about their own bodies. But actually, it plays a huge part in bullying. And I would say, even if your child isn't the person who is, being bullied, then basically all of us, if we've got children, our kids are either witnessing bullying, or they are being bullied, or they're the bully. And none of those three scenarios are scenarios that I want my children to be in. So that's kind of really what is driving my desire for change as well.
I think it's fascinating about the stat for bullying is phenomenal, in the sense that when you say that people are either doing it in, being on the end of bullying or seeing it. And I guess the question then leads to, if we're listening as an adult, we've got this real sense of responsibility now to, with organisations like yourself, drive change and attitude. So there'll also be people listening going, okay, Molly, I get what you're saying here, and I agree with you. And wouldn't it be great if we lived in a society that wasn't defined by people's opinions of other people's bodies? Okay, I'm a mum. How do I do that? What am I doing? What are the changes that I'm making at home, in my stimulus for my children, in the conversations I'm having with my children? What demands do I make on my kids' school? So go for it, Molly. What are some of the changes that we need to be demanding and be doing and putting into practice?
I think it can be useful to think about this. It's such a massive subject, and it's so overwhelming, and it can almost feel, when you see the breadth of the subject, it makes you think, well, what's the point? What change? What impact can I possibly make? Well, the thing is, society is a huge concept, right? But we're all members of society. Society is made up, by individual people. So actually, I think that although those stats are quite scary, and those stats point to an alarming issue, there are lots of things that are positive. So the fact that we're having this conversation right now, people are starting to become more aware of this issue, is a good thing. And I think we just need to keep doing that. But I think on an individual level, I think it's really important to know that sometimes it's what you need to not do, just as much as what you need to do. So just like a really simple thing can be that if you, on an individual level, are having negative thoughts and feelings about your own body, just don't voice those out loud in front of your child, because children will role model. And there's a huge amount of research that shows that children of parents who are regularly talking about dieting or wanting to change their body in some way are more likely to then role model those behaviours. So there was a study done a few years ago that found 34% of 5-year-old girls already talking about wanting to go on a diet. And when they then researched those children, they found a lot of those children were learning those behaviours from, overhearing the important adults in their life talking about these things. So just not voicing some of those concerns can be an impact, even if you don't necessarily feel that way. And then I would say, like, if your children are slightly older, being open about the fact that we do live in this really high pressure, appearance pressurized society, and talking to our kids about that. So I'm not saying that we kind of have this toxic positivity thing and to pretend that everything's all right and just don't even allude to it. What I'm saying is we don't voice those negative comments about bodies in front of our kids, but that doesn't mean that we can't also acknowledge that actually it can be difficult. We're growing up in a society that can make us feel all sorts of ways about our bodies, and that can be hard. And creating a safe space, for our children to talk to us about those things and just listening. It's really, really common for parents, as soon as a child voices something negative about their own body. So maybe they say, I don't know, Toby called me fat at school today, or, oh, I'm ugly, or whatever. It's really common for a parent, and it's such a natural reaction for a parent to want to rush in and say, oh no, you're not ugly, you're beautiful, or you're not fat, you're lovely, And what that does is that reinforces the idea that fat is a bad thing, and it kind of immediately gives power to that insult, and it also reinforces the idea that the way that we look is really important. So another way to reframe that conversation could be, well, first of all, that how did that make you feel, and just letting the child talk a little bit about how it made them feel, and then going into kind of this idea that actually, that's really interesting that they use the word fat as an insult, because actually fat shouldn't be an insult. You would use the word thin as an insult, or tall as an insult, or short tonight. No, it's just a neutral descriptor. So that can be quite powerful, neutralizing a word that has often been weaponized against people. And then kind of taking it back to, but do you know what? It wasn't okay that Toby or whoever commented on your body, because we don't comment on other people's bodies. Your body is your own, and no one has the right to comment on it. And actually, let's think about some of the things that our bodies can do, because the way our bodies look is one of the least important things about us. So those kind of messages, and reinforcing those kind of statements, and having like a handy sort of like a handy sort of list of those kind of statements up your sleeve can be quite a useful thing. So I like affirmations. I think affirmations on their own don't work, but actually using affirmations as part of a wider toolkit can be quite good. But with kids, you have to really use them in a interactive way. So stickers, putting little like notes in lunch boxes, or cards in lunch boxes, getting kids to really use and then talk about them. So what does that mean? All bodies are good bodies. What do you think that means? Using picture books as a way to introduce children to body diversity, and this idea that actually all bodies are good bodies. Picture books are great, particularly for little kids. And then the other thing that always comes up is, well, what do I do when I see my wider family? Because Auntie Brenda is always talking about her diet, and I don't know how to manage that. And that can be hard, and I don't think there's a right or wrong way, because depending on also the kind of body that you live in, it might also impact how safe you feel to be able to bring up, to put a boundary in the ground. So there are a couple of things that can be useful in those situations. So one can be just preparing your kids that, when we go for Christmas dinner or whatever, and we see Auntie Brenda, she might make comments about food, what other people are eating, what she's eating. And that actually she just does it in the old way. We don't do it that way. We do it in the new way in our house. And, we just have to sort of like disregard some of that stuff that Auntie Brenda might be saying. Another thing could be having a conversation with Auntie Brenda and just saying, we're trying to learn about promoting positive body image at home. You might not be aware, but, I found some really interesting, stuff about this. And so we're trying not to talk about food and like moralizing it or saying it's good or bad or bodies or whatever. Do you think that's something you could support us with,
Okay, so Molly, I've got a question for you then, because sometimes, especially some of my younger children, will say, or will use a descriptor. So that lady over there is fat. Or that lady over there is very short. Am I supposed to challenge that, or am I supposed to let the conversation carry on? Am I doing more damage by opening up a conversation and ingraining it and saying, let's talk about it? Or am I better at having a quick response to say, actually, what do you do with little ones?
I think it would depend on the situation. So I think it's very, very normal and natural for children to notice differences. And I think that if they're noticing differences in a neutral way, and they're doing that with you privately, I don't think it's a bad thing to just allow them to be inquisitive about differences. So if you've got a toddler or a little one who's saying, oh mummy, this lady in this book is fat, or that lady on television is fat, or whatever, then, oh yes, she is. We all have different shaped bodies. Some people have fat bodies, some people have thin bodies. And isn't that great? All bodies are good bodies. Aren't bodies cool? Having that conversation just kind of neutralizes that word, and the word fat, and it neutralizes the idea that there are bad bodies. So it kind of can just make children be inquisitive, and actually not, what you don't want to do is sort of then ban the word fat. Oh, no, whoa, you can't say that, because it just, again, gives it power. And actually you wouldn't say that if they were pointing, oh, that lady has lovely long hair, would you react in the same way? So I think just reacting in the same way that you would regardless of what they're saying. But at the same time, it's important for children to know actually it isn't polite or nice or okay to comment on other people's bodies without their permission. So, you might then want to take it a step further and say, if it's a private conversation, that, it's not nice to comment on someone's body in front of them without their permission. What else, what else can you notice about that lady? Hasn't she got cool shoes on, or, what... I love the way that, she's chosen a pink jumper with red trousers. She looks really creative. Like she looks like she's putting colours together really well. What do you notice? Kind of taking it away from the way that she looks and trying to bring it back to like some other characteristic. But I think it is normal for children to notice differences. And I think what we need to do is actually to start to celebrate those differences, and actually then that can allow children on an individual level to celebrate their own differences. Because if a child has a bigger tummy, for example, than some of their friends, or if a child is a wheelchair user, or, a child has a protected hairstyle, any of these other differences that actually might make them feel different from their friend, actually we want to celebrate those things and say that's cool because we're all made to be different, and that's like a good thing. It's a different situation if your child is then pointing that out to the person in the street. And I think, again, it's important in that situation to just kind of neutralize. So, say to the child, yes, or you've noticed a difference, and isn't it great how we're all different? And then in that situation to kind of, smile at the person if they're within earshot, so they understand that you're not, you're not shutting the conversation down with the child, but you also recognize like their humanity in that situation. And I think that it's often something parents, particularly of little kids, feel really scared about, because it's such a natural thing to be like, oh, no, you don't say that, and then like run away and then not raise it. Having said that, it's difficult in the moment to know how to respond to that. So if you don't respond in that way, you can always come back to the conversation later. And you can always say, oh, how this morning, did you notice that lady? And I didn't know, and I sort of told you off a little bit. Let's have a chat about that now, because I think sometimes I think I maybe dealt with it wrong. And you know what, sometimes grown-ups do get things wrong. And I think that that's all right to admit that to children. We don't have to be these all-knowing people. Children are pretty clever, and they know when we're trying to fob them off.
They do. And I think, I've got another question then for you on that, about children being fobbed off, is I need you to fill in the blanks for me now, because I'll get asked by my children when I come home from exercising on a Saturday morning, why do you go to the gym, mummy? And it's, what am I saying that makes this frame this in the right way for why I'm going to the gym? What would you say? What would be my answer, Molly, if you could be me?
Why do you go to the gym? What's your impetus for wanting to go to the gym on a Sunday morning?
So for brain space, and I want to be healthy, but my children are also noticing a change in my body shape, and it's whether I acknowledge that, because I've had 6 babies, so my body has changed shape. It's grown and it's shrunk again. And I don't know whether I want them to see that I'm going to the gym to lose my tummy, which might be, perhaps in my own body image is one of my motivators. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I don't want my children to think that if I do or don't keep my tummy, it's a good or bad thing. So it's just, it's just how I respond to them.
Yeah. So I would say I go to the gym on a Sunday morning because I like it. It makes me feel good. I like to have a bit of time on my own. Moving my body makes me feel powerful and strong. If your children are then commenting and noticing changes to your body, then it's okay to say, yeah, bodies do change. They can get bigger, they can get smaller, depending on the period of our life that we're going through. That's very normal. Bodies don't look the same all the time because we're not plastic dolls. Our bodies, they can stretch and shrink and get bigger and smaller. I think what the research around movement shows us is that, well, number one, a child who feels better about their body is more likely to want to engage in movement and less likely to want to skip sports and PE. So actually supporting children to have positive body image, whatever their body looks like, is a really fundamental and important aspect of getting them to even want to be interested and engaged in moving their body. And then I think it's important to note that actually focusing on the intrinsic benefits of movement, so the things that we can't see, rather than the extrinsic, so those aesthetic motivators, is actually shown to lead to longer term healthy relationships with exercise and mean that we exercise consistently. So actually for me, with my kids, I want my kids to grow up, you know, having a healthy relationship with movement, so enjoying how movement makes them feel. And I know that actually if they know that all movement is valid, so a walk is just as valid as going to the gym, or, you know, some days you might feel like going to the park, some days you might feel like doing some cosmic kids yoga at home. Like, all of those things are valid. So the ways that we move our body are, you know, there's no, again, like with food, there's no moral hierarchy. And then that means that then children are more likely to be in tune with what their bodies want to do. And I think it's also really important to allow children to know that actually movement is for everybody. So there are loads of sporting heroes that maybe have bodies that don't look like the types of bodies that we might see on magazines. But actually these heroes do exist. It's just that they don't get as much airspace. So allowing children to see a diverse range of different bodies moving can be really fundamental in helping children not make judgments about, you know, someone's body. Like, you can only be healthy if you've got a six-pack. You know, we don't want children to be making those kind of judgments. But also, if a child, you know, has a bigger body, or their body doesn't fit whatever they think an athletic body looks like, we can risk is they can then think, well, movement isn't for me, and so I'm just not going to bother. And actually, if they can see, actually, doesn't matter what you look like, movement is for everybody. Look at all these people who enjoy moving their body and doing lots of different things. They're more likely to engage in it. It will be the gateway to them actually taking part in that activity.
We watched some athletics recently, and there was coverage of shot put. And so you saw a very different body shape from the athletes that were running the 100 metres versus the shot putters. And actually, it was a great opportunity for us to have that very conversation with our children, because the shot putters were absolute powerhouses, and their whole body shape and power in their body enabled them to chuck the shot as far as they could. And actually, it meant that their body shape meant that they were able to do their job. And it was interesting, though, because we were having this conversation, and whilst we're busy having this conversation with our kids, the camera's panned back to the runners, you know, and we've moved off shot put. And I'm sure that, you know, what you're saying about the whole coverage piece and being able to have access to different imagery, different body shapes, and being able to view it and see those in active bodies, regardless of shape, is so important. I still feel, when I talk to you, that there is so much more for me to learn as a parent, and it's made me think about some of the conversations I have with my children. And I do want to ask you one more thing before we close today, although we could probably talk all day on this subject. And I'm sure there's people leaning in on their headphones today going, oh my God, I want to talk to Molly more. And they can if they follow you. But I want to talk to you about social media, because my perhaps slightly indulgent part of this podcast is that I get to talk to you about my own kids. But I have some preteens who are just on the cusp of being able to have social media and the apps, etc. How on earth can you manage a positive body image in a world from where they're governed by social media? What do you do?
It's so hard. It's really hard. I'm not going to pretend that it's easy, and I'm a mum navigating this stuff myself. I think that the first thing is it's important to be honest with our kids that there's still a lot we don't know about the impact of social media, and there's a lot that we don't know. You know, we didn't grow up with this. You know, I didn't grow up. I wasn't a 13-year-old who had TikTok. You know, I didn't have a phone. They didn't exist when I was, you know, that age. So I think it's important to be and to have those conversations with our kids in a way that makes us they can see that we're fallible human beings. I do, however, think it's also really important not to just ban it, because as soon as you ban something, or what you can risk doing, and this is the same for sweets, it's the same for TikTok, it's the same for anything. As soon as you ban it, you just make it more attractive. And so all you're doing is you're giving it more glamour. You're giving it, you make it this thing that children are just going to want even more. So one thing that I find, I mean, part of my job is using social media, and I'm quite open with my kids. Oh, I hate it sometimes. There are loads of really good parts of social media. So the things that I enjoy about it are, it can give me access to community. It can help me learn new things. It can support positive body image if you're following a diverse range of people. It can give you access to representation and body diversity that you might not be seeing in the other forms of media that you're consuming. And those are positive things. For children, like, you know, my daughter's 13, actually social media can also be an opportunity for them to explore their identity. You know, we know that like teenagers, one of the fundamental parts of growing and being a teenager is that identity exploration and learning who they are. What do they believe in? Who are they as people? What do they like doing? Social media can be an opportunity to nurture that if they're, you know, following accounts that they're interested in. But what it can also do on the other side is it can promote narrow body ideals. It can make us feel like our bodies are wrong if they don't fit that. There is a huge amount of misinformation out there, particularly around health, food and fitness. And if we're not using our critical thinking skills and really examining what we're seeing, then we can end up just absorbing this information and just thinking about it uncritically. And that's bad for our health and our well-being and our body image. They can also be a place where people, you know, take part in weight stigma, bullying. That weight stigma that we see in the playground can filter through, and it can happen online. So I think it's important to have boundaries around it and open conversations. So we have in our house something that works quite well, but again, different families are different. I'm not going to proclaim that there's a one size fits rule, one rule fits all sizes, one size fits all approach to this subject. Because I don't think there is, because you have to do what works for your family, just in the way that when we think about like infant feeding or whatever, you know, different things are going to work for different people. The thing that works for us is having a family guidelines. So I find I'll often be telling my daughter, you know, you spent a lot of time on your phone. Don't you think it's time to come off your phone? And then I'll be there with my phone in my hand, you know, and what am I role modeling?
Guilty.
You know, or no phones at the dinner table, but then my husband's got his phone like next to his plate, you know, or in his pocket. So I think what we have is some family guidelines that we all have to stick to, and we try and have social media blackout days regularly. So, you know, a Sunday is a day that we don't tend to go online, and I'll try and encourage my kids to do other things that don't involve phones. Particularly with TikTok, and my kids aren't using Instagram or anything. They're not interested in that. But my 11-year-old is wanting to use like TikTok and Snapchat. And I've started to get her to notice the kind of comments that people will make on other people's videos, and how often those comments are appearance-based comments. So like, you know, if her friend posts a TikTok video, often lots of the comments underneath will be, oh, you're so pretty, oh, you look so lovely, oh, I wish I could look like you. And it'll often be like a lip syncing video. And I just said to my daughter, isn't it interesting, they're all commenting on the way she looks. No one said anything about how great at lip syncing she is in that video. Surely that's the whole point of the video. And then you see like a little light bulb go off, and oh yeah, oh, why might that be? And then we'll have a conversation about it. And, you know, wouldn't it be cool if someone just commented on something other than the way that she looks in that video? And then also encouraging our children, if they're of the age where they can start to use social media, to be thinking about who they're following. And I'm not saying just, you know, get your kids to go and follow a whole load of body positive influencers, although sure, do that as well. But also encourage them to follow accounts that have nothing to do with appearance, because social media is full of beauty influencers and fitness influencers and health and wellness influencers. And I'd argue that's all kind of the same thing. So actually make sure that our kids are what are they interested in? Like, if your kid's really into Lego, look up some Lego influencers. Like, they exist. Do they like dogs? There are so many cool like dog accounts on Instagram. I love interiors, so I like following accounts that are about home renovations and stuff like that. So really just kind of following the things that have a broad range of interests. And then most importantly, and this is a rule that we all have in our house, my husband included, if you see something online that worries you or makes you think about something in a different way or inspires you, share it with the rest of the family, and let's talk about it. And there have been some instances where my daughter has seen something about like a supposedly newsworthy thing, and she's just seen it on TikTok, and she's come to me and she's been worried about it. And then we've talked about it, and we've talked about, well, have you verified that information anywhere else? Have you looked on a news website? Have you used some media literacy skills to actually unpick what might be the purpose of them putting that in that video? They're wanting to get clicks and followers. And, I think that it's really important to let children use those critical thinking skills, not just with body image, but with everything. But it works for body image stuff as well.
It's fascinating. And I think what's come across so well in this conversation today is just how much is in the power of conversation, and maybe not having all the answers, but just having those conversations, whether it's with your 3-year-old or your 13-year-old. There's so much that we could carry on to talk about, and I'm sure we will meet again. We'll have you back, Molly, because there's more that I want to talk to you about. But just for time for today, what would you like people to take away based on your work with Body Happy Org? What's next, and what would you like people to take away today as the thing that they're going to think about or go do as a result of listening to us today?
I would love for people to just be mindful of, when basically, I want everyone to know that all bodies are good bodies, and I want people to start being mindful of the messages that tell them otherwise and help, notice those messages. And the other last thing that I want to just say is, if your children go to a state-funded school in England, you do need to be aware that if they're in reception or year 6, they'll be weighed at school this year unless you opt them out. So that's a whole other conversation, but it's just something to be aware of. We've got an information pack about that on our website that might be useful if you want to learn more about that program and make an informed decision. But that is all part of that bigger piece, and just being aware that actually this is something that impacts all of us, not just outside of the home. I want us to take this conversation away from just thinking about what can we do at home, and actually how can we start to challenge some of these messages that make us believe that all bodies aren't good bodies and that there are bad bodies. So yeah, that one, if I can leave with one thing, it's just knowing, all bodies are good bodies, all bodies are valuable bodies, and all bodies are worthy bodies.
It's all we want, isn't it? Especially for our children and for their future. Molly, thank you so much. I do feel like we've touched the tip of an iceberg with this topic, and there is so much more that we can unpick. And if you want to know more, Molly touched there on the WAY programme in state schools across the UK. And if you want to know more, there is a wealth of information on bodyhappy.org, so that you can, and we'll put all the links in the details from today's podcast, so that you can look that up and make an informed decision about children being weighed in schools. But Molly, thank you. It's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you around the subject of family body health, but in particular perceptions from our children. If you want to watch this podcast, you can do. Amazingly, some people like to look at us just chatting here with a pair of headphones on and a microphone. There's not a lot to see, but if you do want to watch the podcast back, you can on the Family Health Podcast YouTube channel. Otherwise, make sure you're subscribed to Family Health. There are loads more brilliant episodes to come from wonderful guests like Molly. And if there is a family health subject that you want me to talk to, right, you want me to find an expert and chat to, as we have done today, please do get in touch, because we'd love to have your input into what you want to hear. And last series, you said to us, we want to talk about children's body image, and here is Molly today. So Molly, thank you so much for joining us today, and make sure you're subscribed to Family Health Podcast so you continue to receive all of our episodes. Many thanks. Thank you for listening to Family Health by Mini First Aid. I hope you found our podcast really useful and informative. If you want to know more about Mini First Aid classes, courses, qualification courses or first aid supplies, please do visit minifirstaid.co.uk or look us up on all your favourite social platforms at Mini First Aid. As you care for your family's well-being, remember that Unity Mutual believes in enriching lives beyond pounds and pence and is here to support both their health and financial future. Choose Unity Mutual for your junior ISA and you'll not only invest in their dreams but also receive a free mini first aid class. Thanks to Unity Mutual for making it all possible. Until next time, stay informed and financially secure, knowing that your journey with Unity Mutual is about more than just money. It's about nurturing your future and protecting your loved ones every step of the way.